So, I think creator economy has been lying to people for about a decade now, and it's not some evil conspiracy, which honestly might make it worse. Because nobody's even doing it on purpose. It's just kind of how the story got told. Like, the story is make good stuff, stay consistent, and the audience finds you. Work hard, get noticed, and get paid. Cause and effect. Nice little formulas. And I used to believe that. And I think a lot of you guys do too. Because it's a nice story. Except that's not actually how any of this works. And the gap between that's not how it works and that's literally how everybody talks about it is where a lot of creators quietly lose their minds. Here's the actual thing. Here's the actual thing nobody puts in the onboarding packet. Well, actually, there's no onboarding packet, first off. The second you try to build an audience around the job or the thing you want to make, you're doing two jobs. Not one job with two parts. Two actual jobs. Two different skill sets. Two entirely different brains, basically. One job is what you're actually doing or here for. Like the writing, the filmmaking, the painting, the editing, the world building, whatever your specific flavor of making things happens to be. The other job is getting a single human being to notice that the first job exists. And those two jobs do not reward the same behavior, like at all. Craft rewards patience. It rewards sitting with something ugly for way too long until it stops being ugly. It rewards feeling in private, rewriting the same scene 9 times, throwing out 40 pages, restudying anatomy you thought you already knew. See, craft is slow on purpose. That's not a flaw. In craft, it's kind of the whole point. Audience building rewards none of that, though. Like, it rewards showing up on a schedule or packaging and being legible in the first 3 seconds to someone who has the attention span of a startled cat. It rewards doing the thing that worked last time, again, because algorithm. Or the bookstore algorithm that a human buyer with a quota, doesn't matter which version. Like, it likes patterns that it's already seen succeed. So you've got one half of your brain that wants to slow down and get weird and experiment, and the other half that gets rewarded for being fast, repeatable, and legible. And somehow you're supposed to run both of those at the same time, in the same body, on the same day. And nobody talks about this part enough. The internet does not reward quality. I want to say it's slower because people get mad at me for it, but the internet does not reward quality. It rewards discoverability, and those may sound similar, but they're not the same thing. You can be the most technically gifted person in the world in your medium, genuinely exceptional, genius even, the kind of perfect that makes other professionals get quietly nervous, and still get buried because discoverability isn't a craft metric. It's a logistics metric. It's about timing, packaging, platform behavior, and whether the algorithm gods are feeling generous this week. See, craft answers, is this good? Discoverability answers, does this reach anybody? Those are two different questions with different answers, and creators get torn apart pretending they're the same question. So in real life, what that means is a writer who spent 10 years genuinely getting better at structure and prose is competing for actual attention and money against a person who spent 10 years getting better at writing a hook. And depending on the week, the hook wins. Not because the hook is better, because the hook is the system built to surface. That's not a moral failing on anyone's part. It's just what the pipes are shaped like. Which is crazy if you think about it. Okay, here's where it gets worse, though, because I haven't even gotten to the part that actually breaks people. The audience scales faster than the human does. That's the actual trap. Growth isn't additive, it's multiplicative. And almost nobody explains that part to you before you start. You think, reasonably, that if your audience doubles, your workload doubles. More comments to read, more messages. Sure, fine, manageable. That's not what happens, though. What happens is the role multiplies. A writer becomes a marketer. An artist becomes a brand manager. A filmmaker becomes a part-time data analyst, studying thumbnails and retention graphs like they're reading tea leaves. You didn't sign up to learn what a click-through rate is. You signed up because you like telling stories. And then one day you're 3 hours deep into a spreadsheet trying to figure out why the second video this month underperformed the first one. And you stop and think, wait, when did I become this person? Where did the fun me go? And this is the mistake I keep seeing people make when they talk about creator burnout, by the way. They frame it as doing too much. Like the problem is volume. It's not volume, typically. It's the switching. Like one part of your brain wants to play, get weird, follow a tangent because it's fascinating. And the other part is tracking numbers, worried about a dip, trying to keep the machine running that is zero patience for fun. And living between those two modes for years doesn't just tire you out. It disconnects you from the thing you started doing in the first place. Not because you stopped caring, because the business side of the thing started actively competing with the creative side on a daily basis inside one nervous system that was never built to run two completely different jobs in parallel. And this is what annoys me, honestly. Like, we have a language for this in literally every other industry, and we just refuse to use it here. If I told you a single person at a company was simultaneously the head writer, head of marketing, data analyst, community manager, editor, and business owner, you would immediately go, okay, that's like 5 jobs. That company is understaffed. That person needs help. We would call that an HR problem. We don't call it that when a creator does it. We call it the hustle. Or wearing too many hats. Like it's a little fun accessory situation. And not a structural overload that gets flagged in literally any other workplace on earth. Let me tell you the actual thing that got me thinking about this. And because it's not abstract for me. The gold rush. The actual real 1884 or 1848 to 1855-ish, people walking to California gold rush. Everybody remembers the names of those who struck gold. Almost nobody remembers the thousands, and I mean real historical thousands of people who spent years out there panning and digging and freezing, starving and finding nothing, going home broke if they came home at all. And the wild part is, the story that survived wasn't most people who tried lost everything. It was go west, strike it rich. Like, survivor bias didn't just shape that legend. It replaced the actual statistics with a better narrative. The losers didn't get erased because nobody cared. They got erased because their stories were boring and the winner's story was useful. Keep that in mind. Because it probably wouldn't shock you if I told you that creator culture tells the exact same story with the exact same erasure. We hear about the person who blew up in 18 months, or the self-published author who hit a bestseller list off one TikTok, or the indie game that came out of nowhere and sold millions of copies. We don't hear anywhere near as loudly about the much, much larger population of equally talented, equally hardworking people who did everything right and got nothing. Not because their work is worse. Often it wasn't. They just didn't strike the vein. And the people who did strike the vein got interviewed, got to write the how I did it thread, got to become the formula. When a huge amount of what actually happened to them was, frankly, timing they couldn't control and couldn't have predicted. And I don't think that means success is impossible, just to be honest and clear. I think that the path I think it means the path looks more linear and more guaranteed in hindsight than it ever feels like in the moment. And creator advice culture sells you the hindsight version like it's a map, when it's actually a survivor's memory of a maze he already got out of. And nobody talks about this part either. The survivors are the ones writing the maps. That's not an accusation. It's just how structurally it works. The person who has the audience, the credibility, the platform to make How I Grew to 1 Million Subscribers video is, by definition, somebody who struck gold. You will basically never see an equally detailed, confident breakdown titled, How I Did Everything Right for 6 years and It Still Didn't Work. Not because that person doesn't exist. Statistically, there are way more of them than anybody else. But because nobody hands a microphone to the guy who panned for 6 years and came home with nothing. He doesn't have the audience to make that video. The silence isn't proof the formula works. It's just what failure sounds like when it doesn't get a platform. So, what ends up happening is the advice ecosystem accidentally becomes this closed loop made entirely of people for whom the system worked, explaining the system to people for whom it hasn't worked yet, as though their experience is representative of, frankly, everything exceptional. It's a little like asking only lottery winners how to win the lottery. They'll have a story. It might even be a true story about what they personally did, but it's not going to paint an accurate picture of the odds. Okay, but here's where I'm starting to get a little irritated, and I want to be honest about that irritation instead of pretending I'm neutral about it. Because I'm not neutral. I don't know if you guys can tell. But the advice economy that has grown up around this, the whole like how to grow on YouTube, how to get a book deal, how to actually make it as an artist online, that industrial complex. Well, they package growth like it's a formula. Post more, be consistent, hook them in 3 seconds, although nobody knows how. Sorry. Study your analytics. Niche down. And okay. I'll be honest, some of that is useful information that should be taken with a grain of salt. Seriously. Because I'm not going to pretend that thumbnail psychology is fake. The framing underneath it, though, like, that's the part that does the damage. If you succeeded, you followed the formula to the T. If you failed, you didn't work hard enough, or weren't consistent enough, or your hook wasn't good enough. And that's comforting because that makes the system feel fair. If failure is always a personal feeling, then success is always earnable. And that's a nice thing to believe about the world, isn't it? But it's also, quite often, not true at all. Distribution matters. Platform shift matters. Ask anyone whose entire income model got rearranged overnight because the platform changed its algorithm, which happens constantly, by the way, and is treated as some kind of unpredictable weather event instead of the predictable cost of building your income inside someone's house. Luck matters. Timing matters enormously. Releasing the right project 6 months before the wrong trend or 6 months after the right one can be the entire difference between a career and a hobby. And that has nothing to do with how hard you worked or how good the work was. I screw this up myself, like in a small but real way. Earlier on, I had a piece I was so proud of. One of the better things I'd made up to that point. Structured perfectly, the kind of thing where I actually sat with the draft for weeks longer than felt necessary. And it landed with basically crickets. Seriously, crickets. Like, meanwhile, I did notice that something I'd made as a throwaway with way less effort, that I made, I think, in an afternoon, half jokingly the whole time. Well, that did more numbers than the careful piece ever touched, and has been doing numbers for months after I'd completely forgotten about it, and even to this day. And the lesson I could have taken from that is the throwaway one must have been better. The audience has spoken. Listen to the data. But no, that's the lesson the advice formula world wants you to take. But about that, I don't think that's it at all. I think the throwaway one was simply more legible at a glance, and legibility at a glance is a different skill than depth. And confusing those two is exactly the trap I'm describing in real time with my own work. And this is where people mess up, and I see it constantly. They take a single data point about discoverability and turn it into a verdict about quality. The thing that did better is not automatically the better thing. It's the more discoverable thing. Sometimes those overlap. Sometimes they don't. And if you can't tell the difference between this performed well and this was good, well, you will slowly, gradually start making worse art that performs better and still call it growth. Actually, let me sit with that sentence for a sec, because I think that's closer to the center of the whole thing. You will start making worse art that performs better, and you will call it growth, because those metrics are improving even when the thing you actually wanted to make is quietly dying underneath the metrics. That's the trade nobody warns you you're making. Nobody hands you a contract and says, sign here to swap hands, to swap craft satisfaction for view count. Nobody does that. But a lot of people end up signing it anyway. One small optimization at a time, none of which feels like a betrayal in the moment. So, so in real life, what does this do to the indie world game? Or sorry, what does the indie game world look like? Because I think this is the cleanest version of the problem that I'm talking about, and it doesn't even need the algorithm to be the villain. The math did it on its own. What I mean is the Steam happened. Distribution gets solved, genuinely solved, like miraculously compared to 20 years earlier. You didn't need a publisher. You don't need a box on a shelf at a physical store. You upload your game and it exists in front of the entire world instantly. That should have been the end of the problem. Making a thing was always going to be the hard part. That nobody pretends that it's easy. Absolutely not. But getting it in front of people, that part was supposed to be solved. Except solving the distribution didn't solve the discovery. See, those are two different problems wearing the same outfit. The store can have your game or your book or your art, and it doesn't mean that a single human eye lands on it. Thousands of games are released on Steam every year now, and a genuinely great game can disappear into the same scroll as 1,000 other genuinely great games and 1,000 mediocre ones, and nobody ever sees the difference between them because they don't see most of them at all. See, the bottleneck didn't move from can you make it to can you sell it. It moved from can you make it to can a human being's attention ever physically arrive at the thing you made. That's not a marketing problem in the old sense. That's an attention scarcity problem. And it's brutal in a very modern way, specifically. Because it means that the thing standing between you and an audience isn't a gatekeeper anymore. It's noise. Like, you can't pitch your way past noise the way you used to pitch your way past a gatekeeper. There's no door to knock on. There's just an ocean. And the exact same thing happens to writers, painters, video essayists. Literally everyone in this conversation. Technology solved distribution decades ago, basically. But it didn't solve attention. Those are not the same achievement. And I don't think we've fully absorbed that as a culture yet. Because we keep talking about getting your work out there. Like, that's still the hard part. It's not. Anyone can get their work out there in about 4 minutes flat. The hard part is making one stranger's eyes stop moving long enough to land on it. And this is where it gets insane, because that creates an entirely new behavior pattern that didn't even need to exist before. What I call content grindset culture, for lack of a better label. The idea that if discovery is this random and noisy, then the only rational response is volume. Post more, upload constantly, optimize relentlessly. Treat your output like a slot machine with more pulls equals more chances at the jackpot. And I don't know why this is a thing, but it actually worked. Sometimes. Often enough that it became gospel. So now there's an entire ecosystem of advice creators out there telling creators to behave like factories. Not make one excellent thing a month. Make 6 adequate things a week, because adequate times 6 beats excellent times 1 in a system built to reward frequency over depth. And so what ends up happening is consistently, quietly gets confused with sustainability. And those are not the same word, even though everyone uses them interchangeably. Consistency is a behavior. Sustainability is whether that behavior can continue without destroying the person doing it. Like, you can be extremely consistent for 18 months and then implode. And from the outside, it looks like they gave up or they got lazy, when what actually happened is the math of the system asked for the pace of a robot that's something a human body and creative process were never built to hold. Like, we celebrate the output. Nobody's measuring whether the process behind it was actually healthy, because the output is the only part anyone outside the creator life ever sees. Sorry, that came out a little heavier than I meant it to. So let me bring it back down. So the point isn't grind set bad, rest good. It's narrower than that. The point is that an entire generation of creator advice exists specifically because attention is scarce and chaotic, and that advice optimizes for frequency because that's the only lever an individual person can actually pull. You can't control discoverability directly. You can control how many times you roll the dice. So the system trains everyone to roll constantly and calls the resulting exhaustion a personal failure to manage your time better, instead of what it actually is, which is an unreasonable ask dressed up as a productivity tip. And the specific way it gets dressed up is the part that bugs me the most, honestly. Because it never shows up as post more or you'll fail. It shows up softer than that. Treat your channel like a business. Show up for your audience. Consistency is a gift you give your community. All of which sounds generous and wholesome right up until you notice what it's actually asking. That you convert your creative process into a schedule. That on a timeline set to a platform you don't own. For an algorithm that will change its mind without telling you. And that if you fail to keep the pace, the framing available to you is, I let my community down, instead of, I correctly identified that this pace was unsustainable for one person. Same behavior, slowing down gets coded as virtue when a business owner does it, and as failure when a creator does it. And that's not a coincidence. That's grind set framing doing exactly what it's built to do, which is bullshit. Okay. Right, the identity part. Because this is the part I think actually does the most long-term damage and gets talked about the least. Audiences find you because you're recognizable. That's just how it works. Audiences like knowing what they're getting, but recognizable calcifies fast. And once it calcifies, it starts making decisions for you. The storyteller becomes the storyteller channel. The artist becomes the art account. The history person becomes the history person. Capital letters basically, like it's a title job or a job title instead of a thing they happen to be curious about this month. And the audience didn't do anything wrong by liking that. They just liked a specific version of you and reasonably want more of that specific version. The problem is what it does to the person underneath the brand once the brand starts outliving the actual interest that built it. Because creative interests evolve for everybody. It's not a flaw. It's just what a curious person does over time, creative or otherwise. Like you get bored of things you used to love, or you get into something adjacent, or you just grow. But the audience building machine you built rewards staying recognizable, consistent, inside the lane that already proves it works. So now you're choosing between making the thing I want to make right now, or making the thing the version of me from 2 years ago got known for. And a lot of people choose the second one repeatedly for years because the audience numbers tell them that's the smart move. And slowly they end up trapped inside a person that was optimized for discoverability instead of chosen for who they currently are. That's not burnout from overwork. That's something closer to identity drift. And it's sneakier because nothing about it looks like a crisis from the outside. The uploads keep coming, the numbers might even keep climbing, but the person behind the channel feels privately and maybe somewhat ashamed of it. Because the whole I have a successful thing and I feel hollow about it sounds grateful. Well, they feel like they're performing a version of themselves that calcified 3 years ago and never got permission to keep changing. Like, you see it happen to people in real time if you followed enough channels long enough. Someone starts a thing because they're genuinely fascinated by it. Say like, I don't know, Crew Crime. I know I said that wrong. I said that wrong on purpose. I'm kidding. True crime, cooking, or retro games. And they build a real audience around that fascination. And then a few years in, you watch that fascination quietly drain out of them on camera. Even when they don't say it directly. The energy gets thinner. The enthusiasm becomes more performed than felt. The comments start saying, "You seem tired lately," before the creators even consciously admitted that to themselves. And the brutal part is that stopping isn't free. The audience didn't subscribe to whatever this person is interested in this year. They subscribe to the specific thing. Changing lanes risks the whole audience. And so a lot of people just don't change lanes. They keep making the thing that used to excite them for an audience that still loves it, while privately dying a little inside about it, because the alternative, actually following where their curiosity is, might cost them everything they built. Right. So here's the fun part. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Here's the part where I think the popular narrative actually gets backwards and is the thing that personally won't leave me alone and led me to write this. So the creator economy loves to frame this as a scarcity of ideas problem, creative block, running out of inspiration. That is, in my experience, almost never the actual issue for anybody who's been at this for any length of time. See, most creators I know are drowning in ideas. I'm drowning in ideas. The notebooks, the notes app, the video and voice memos folders are full to overflowing. That means that the real scarcity isn't creativity. It's time, attention, and energy. 3 sources that do not multiply no matter how good your ideas get. Which is crazy because it means that the actual hard part of being a creator for any length of time is not generating ideas or concepts. It's learning to live with the fact that the overwhelming majority of your ideas are simply never going to become real things. Not because they were bad, but because you only get one life and one nervous system, and there's a hard ceiling on, well, how much any single human can physically finish. That's not a motivational problem you fix with better habits. That's just math. And it's uncomfortable math to sit with at that, because it means that most of what you're excited about right now is probably something you will never make. Well, I could be wrong about this next part, but I don't think the people outside of creative work fully register what's actually happening when they see a finished video, a published book, or a successful stream. They see the 10-minute video. They don't see the abandoned drafts. They don't see the years spent learning a skill that no one will ever notice or compliment. Because good craft is often invisible by design. When editing is doing its job, you're not supposed to see the edit. They don't see the constant low hum of, am I still relevant? Did I post recently enough? Is the algorithm mad at me this week? Which is a kind of pressure that doesn't exist in basically any other line of work in quite the same shape. And this is the problem. We recognize this instantly in any other job, in literally any other context. A novelist isn't just writing. They're the producer, marketer, analyst studying their own sales dashboard. The community manager fielding messages. Occasionally, the accountant, and somewhere in there, hopefully, someone who still loves telling stories. A streamer isn't just going live. They're the producer, the moderator wrangler, the brand, the editor of 3 hours of footage down to the clips that actually circulate. If a single employee at a normal company was doing all of those roles simultaneously, we would immediately say that the company is understaffed and the person is being exploited. We don't say that here. We call it a hobby until it succeeds and a dream job the second it does. With nothing in between those two, acknowledging the actual decades of unpaid, invisible, multi-department labor that got someone from one label to the other. So in real life, what that produces is a kind of strange survivor's guilt running in both directions. Creators who haven't made it feel like they must be doing something wrong because the formula says work hard plus consistency will give you growth. So failure to grow must mean a failure of effort. And creators who have made it feel like imposters, quietly aware that timing and luck did more heavy lifting than the highlight reel admits, while publicly performing a confidence about that formula that they privately know is half hindsight bias dressed up as strategy. And what's weird is we've built an entire culture around measuring the part of this that's easy to measure, while basically ignoring the part that actually matters and is worth it. Like views, subscribers, revenue, easy numbers, clean dashboards. You can screenshot them and put them in a thumbnail. Whether the person behind those numbers is still curious about their own work, whether they still feel like making something instead of just executing a format that used to fill something, there's no dashboard for that. Nobody's tracking creative aliveness on a graph next to watch time. So growth gets treated as proof that everything's working, even in cases where the person experiencing that growth is privately burning out trying to sustain the exact systems that produced it. The metric says success. Because only one of those two things show up on a dashboard, only one of them gets attention and believed. Let me push on that a little bit because that's supposed to be the success story for a second. And because that is actually messier than it looks. Like the internet loves the one-person media empire myth. The solo creator who does everything themselves. No team, no overhead. Just one talented person and a laptop. Proving that you don't need an institution behind you anymore. And yeah, that story is genuinely true in the sense that it has happened to real people repeatedly. But it's never, almost never, the whole story. Because the part that gets cut from the reel, from the highlight, is what happens after the empire actually starts working. And what happens is the workload does not level off. It compounds. And at some point, almost every single time, if the thing keeps going and growing, that one person doing everything set up quietly stops being a feature and starts becoming the bottleneck. So they hire an editor, a thumbnail person, a research assistant, a community manager to handle the inbox that's become a part-time job of its own. The solo creator then becomes a small business with a face attached to it. And usually doesn't advertise that part because the myth that's selling, the independence, the just me against the algorithm, well, that's a story that's more compelling than reality. Which is, I now run a 4-person operation and spend a chunk of my week doing payroll admin work I never wanted any part of. The thing is, the audience kind of needs that myth to stay intact, in a weird way. And part of the appeal of this is just one person is the parasocial closeness it creates. Like you feel like you're getting the unfiltered, unmediated version of a single person, not a product of a social small media company. So there's no... Actually, no, there is a quiet incentive to keep the team invisible even after it exists. To keep saying I in the video scripts when the truer pronoun would be we. Because admitting the scale up happened can read, well, to some part of the audience as a betrayal of the intimacy that built the audience in the first place. Which means a lot of creators end up performing soloness they no longer practice, which is its own small, strange kind of exhausting. That's the thing, though. The cultural myth is independence. The actual reality, almost every time it scales, is collaboration by necessity, not by choice. Audiences scale exponentially. Humans don't scale at all. There's still only one of you, with the same 24 hours as everyone else. So eventually, the gap between audience size and human capacity has to get filled by something. And that something is usually other people that you now have to manage and train and pay. None of which has anything to do with the storytelling that made you want to do this in the first place. Except, hold on. I don't want to make that sound like a clean resolution, because there isn't one. See, hiring help doesn't solve the underlying tension, it just relocates it. So instead of, I'm bad at marketing and exhausted by it, you have, I'm a manager of people who are good at marketing, and managing people is its own entire skill set that also has nothing to do with storytelling. You traded one non-craft job for a different non-craft job. A lot of creators get to the I hired a team stage expecting relief, and instead discover that they've become a CEO of a company whose product just happens to be their personality. Which is genuinely a strange thing to be a CEO of, and not something anybody warns you when you're 22 and excited about your first 1,000 subscribers. And I don't know. That's the part I haven't fully worked out for myself. Like, whether the team stage is actually better or just a different flavor of the same trap with better optics. I could be wrong, but I lean towards the different flavor of the same trap. Because the underlying problem was I personally need to do less labor. Right? No, it wasn't. Because the underlying problem was the thing that grows my creative career is structurally separate from the career itself. And adding employees does not dissolve that separation. It just gives it a payroll. Here's the audience side of that. Because this isn't just a creator feels bad story. The audience is actually a participant in this whole thing, whether they realize it or not. And I think they should sit a little uncomfortably with that. See, audiences consume creative work the same way they consume products. Not out of malice. I want to be clear about that. This is not an audience shaming section. But because the entire infrastructure trains everyone to expect endless availability. Think about that. New videos every week. New books every year. Constant streams and posts and shorts and episodes. It's incredibly easy from the consuming side to forget there's a person behind the upload with energy limits. The exact same bad weeks, the exact same burnout risk as literally everybody watching. And this part gets actually darker than people want to admit. A lot of people out there apply standards to creators they would never apply to anyone else in their life. We get it instantly when a coworker is tired, or when a friend needs the week off, or when a business owner closes the shop for a vacation. Nobody calls that going dark or ghosting responsibilities. But when a creator slows down, takes a break, changes directions, or just misses an upload because they're human having a human week, me, this past week, by the way. Anyway, sorry, back to the immersion. Audiences can react like a contract's been broken. The creator stops being treated like a person and starts being treated like a subscription service that's expected to remain consistent, indefinitely available forever, on schedule, no exceptions. You see that specific language people use. Well, if you pay attention to it. Where's the upload? It's been 2 weeks. Did they quit? Said the way you talk about a streaming show getting canceled, not the way you talk about a person. And I think most people saying that mean it, well, I don't think they mean it as cruelty. It usually isn't. It's just habit. Like the same reflex you'd use on checking if your favorite show dropped a new episode. Applied without thinking to an actual human with a body, a mood, and possibly a cold. So the infrastructure has trained everyone, audiences and creators alike, to treat people like release schedules. And the training works exactly as well as designed. And that's the part that really gets me, though. Creators do this exact same thing to each other. Guilty. The mirror cuts both ways. You will find a creator who's exhausted, running on fumes, scrolling at 1 a.m, wondering why some other creator is posting more, growing faster, and seemingly doing more with less effort. Comparing their actual lives, the behind-the-scenes reality, to someone else's highlight reel. Which is the least fair comparison a person can make. And somehow, the one everybody makes constantly. Like, everybody watches everybody else, assumes everybody else has it figured out. When statistically, given everything we just talked through and that we know about the world, nobody actually does. That's the thing, though. Like, most of us have just gotten used to infinite content while remaining extremely finite people. The internet makes creative output feel limitless, bottomless, always on. People are not limitless. People are not always on. And a huge amount of that pressure sitting underneath modern creative work on the audience and creator sides equally. Wow. Hate to break it to you. But it comes from quietly trying to force those two facts to coexist when they don't. They collide repeatedly in different ways every single week. So let me say something I actually think, because I've been circling it this whole time and I just want to say it out loud. I don't think the conversation should ever be, do creators have it hard or easy? Every job out there is hard in its own shape. I'm not trying to win some kind of suffering contest on behalf of people with ring lights. I think the actual conversation should be about naming what the work actually is, accurately, instead of two competing fantasies that we have currently. It's not magic. It's not luck disguised as a talent. It's not effortless passion that just happens to also pay rent. It's work. Multi-departmental, exhausting in a very specific, under-examined way, sometimes deeply fulfilling, sometimes corrosive, but work. The same as any other profession out there, except this one comes with an audience that watches you do it in real time and forms opinions about your pace. And the more honest we get about that, the less pressure creators are going to feel to perform effortless thriving while quietly drowning behind a thumbnail that took 4 hours to make look casual. Except, I don't know. If the more honest we get is actually a fix, now that I say it out loud, I think I just want it to be a fix. Because the underlying mechanics don't change just because we're honest about them. The audience still scales faster than the human. The algorithm still rewards discovery over depth. The gold rush only remembers the people who struck gold. Steam's storefront is still an ocean to uncover. Honesty doesn't drain that ocean. It just means you're also not lying to yourself about how big it is when you're swimming in it. And maybe that's the most useful version of this. Not a solution, just better eyesight. Knowing the water that's deep doesn't make it shallower. It just means you stop being surprised every single time you go under for a bit. Except, well, okay, maybe that's even a little too tidy. Because better eyesight has a cost that nobody mentions. Once you actually see the mechanism clearly, once you really understand that quality and discoverability are two different axes, that the audience scales faster than you do, that the advice you're getting mostly comes from people the system happens to favor at the time. Well, you can't fully unsee it, can you? Like, you can't go back to the version of yourself that just believed if you made good enough work, it will simply be found. Some people find that clarifying. But I'm being brutally honest. I think a lot of people find it depressing, actually, because the comforting myth at least gave the work a guaranteed meaning. And the accurate picture doesn't guarantee you anything. It just tells you the rules more bluntly. And I'm not totally sure that trade is a win. I'm assuming it is, yes, because I'd rather know, but I've noticed that I haven't actually proven that to myself. So yeah. People keep treating the exhaustion part of this as proof that something's gone wrong. Like burnout is evidence of a mistake somewhere upstream. Work less. Post smarter. Fix your boundaries and exhaustion will go away. And maybe it will sometimes. But I think for a lot of creators, the exhaustion isn't a malfunction. It's just what it feels like to run two incompatible jobs inside a body for years at a time. And at some point, the body stops being able to tell which job it's actually doing anymore. Anyway, so that's where I'm at with it. I don't think there's a tidy end for this one. So if this made you think, like the video, subscribe if you want more stuff like this. This is WriteSparky, and I will see you in the next video.